Okay, awesome. I can see everybody. So in this session, a panel of health providers, women's health professionals, and people with lived experiences will discuss the nuances of preconception health. This session will feature a lively conversation from all of us across this diverse group of leaders about how we define these terms, what they mean to us, why they matter, and of course, what a future forward vision could look like. We'll be monitoring the chat and holding questions at the end. So feel free to put your questions, comments, thoughts in the chat, and we will have a discussion. And then also the speakers for this session, if you guys would like to, well, I'll introduce us and then everybody can go around. Dr. Nargis, Dr. Sarah Beese, me, Elise, Jessica Haynes, who is now on the screen, Kennedy Bridges, and Rio Holiday will be the lead facilitator. And at this moment, I would like to say, take it away, Rio.
And of course, I'm on mute. Nothing like a virtual conference without some tech difficulties. Thank you and welcome everybody to the very first session. I am here as a graphic recorder and graphic facilitator to make the conversation visible to everyone. And I'm going to actually hand it to Sarah to give some context, and then she will pass it back to me.
Great, thank you. And Catherine's going to pull up a couple of quick slides. We are so excited to see everyone here and know that we still have more folks joining us. We had hoped to be with you all in real life person, but we were also realizing that we only had room for 80 and we can accommodate a lot more. So it's really exciting to have a really big table to welcome everyone today. So just wanted to take a minute to set the stage for this first conversation. Next slide. And just highlight a few things. So the case for health promotion and preventive care. So we know that, well, it's important for health systems and clinicians to focus on addressing risk factors during prenatal and postpartum care. And we know that those drive poor birth outcomes for women and infants. We believe that there are critical opportunities that are often missed to address modifiable risk factors for women, people themselves during routine preventive care. So people deserve high quality preventive care to optimize their overall health and well-being, whether or not they later become pregnant. And this is something that we mentioned before, and we want to just say this over and over again during our convening. It's really important to prioritize health and the ability to maintain an optimal state of health and well-being over the life course. Our whole lives, we matter no matter what age we are or what stage we are in, we matter, our well-being matters. And we also know that prioritizing health has the added benefit of setting the stage for a healthy pregnancy and a healthy family if that's what something wants, if that is what someone else hopes for in their future. And that is also really important for people in actualizing what they want for their lives. So we want to just keep a lot of space open for both and thinking during our time together. Next slide. So traditionally, when we talk about preventive care, preconception care, there's lots of different, just wellness overall. There's lots of different kind of buckets or spheres where there are different experts and different types of providers or types of services. And it can be really easy for people working in each of these different circles to get very tunnel visioned about kind of their one issue. And all of these are very important. When we've talked to women and people of reproductive age, however, if you go to the next slide, the reality is that all of those things, they don't work in separate bubbles. They all really come together and are interconnected and interlaced. So we can't just talk about tobacco cessation and not also think about if a person has anxiety or if a person is maybe living in a violent situation. We can't think about exercise and activity if someone is experiencing pain with movement, for example. And so we've just realized that these are all intersecting, and they're all important. And we also need to, one more click, understand that all of these are within a larger context, which is what we can call social determinants of health, what we can call justice, but giving people information or advice to do something when they don't have the resources, the support to act on it, can cause pain and harm. And so we may talk about drink more water, stay hydrated, but if someone's water isn't safe in their home, then something that seems simple is actually not simple and is also a justice issue. So that makes our topic both simple and complex, but we can do hard things and we can take on hard things and do them well. Next slide. And this last slide is going to take us into our conversation. But we, as we said before, we really want to underscore the importance of reproductive justice and really want to lift up Sister Song and their definition of reproductive justice as the human right to maintain personal bodily autonomy, to have children, not have children, and parent the children we have in safe and sustainable communities. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ria.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. So I want to ground us in a couple of the things that Sarah mentioned: justice, social determinants of health, intersectionality, reproductive justice. These are big, big topics, complex topics that affect all of us. And I'm thrilled to be here today to support the conversation. And for those of you who might not be familiar with graphic recording, I am really here to help make visible three things. And I'm going to do this by listening, synthesizing, and then the part that you'll actually see is taking, documenting using words and images what is happening in the conversation. So I'm here to help make visible three main things. First is that we need to do things differently in order to create a different future. And one small way of doing that in this specific session is by bringing in visual learning and graphic recording and lessening emphasis on the written word, which some of you may know as one of the tenets of white supremacy culture. So at various points in the conversation, I will be sharing my screen. You'll see graphics. Next, we wanted to step aside to listen, really listen to new and different voices in the space. We have wonderful panelists bringing different perspectives, and by graphic recording what they're saying, we'll have an artifact to turn to in the future to make sure that we don't forget this conversation. And then finally, we wanted to anchor ourselves in the future. Our goal is not to start a conversation and get down in the dumps about all of the obstacles around us right now, but to really rise out and start our conversation in what we imagine to be possible. And so given that spirit of being grounded in the future, my first question for the group is, what are your wildest dreams in terms of having people in their reproductive years be healthy and well? What does that look like? What does that feel like? What does it mean for women, communities, families? And as you begin to answer this question, I'll invite you to say your name once more and your affiliation. I'd like to start with Jessica or Kennedy, you can decide. And I'd love to hear from one of you first and then have you pass it to one of your teammates on the dream team. And Sarah is going to help keep track of who needs to speak and who will jump in to help manage. And I will be looking down because that's where my iPad is. So with that, Jessica or Kennedy, please take it away.
Hi. I'm Kennedy Bridges. I use the pronouns she, her, and they, them. To just briefly introduce myself, I am a UNC student pursuing a dual degree in social work and public health. I'm also a full spectrum doula, providing support for folks in labor, postpartum, abortion, really the full range of care. And so the way I would answer this question, I always go back to that definition of reproductive justice that Sarah shared. The human right to maintain personal bodily autonomy, to have children, not have them, and parent the children we have in safe and sustainable communities is so powerful. And I use that as kind of my guiding post for my vision of this work. But it's a very simple definition, but has huge implications because it requires intentional transformation of so many different systems, which can be daunting, but I see as something that's really hopeful if we are all kind of having this collective vision and moving toward this definition. So it implicates, the criminal legal system, child welfare, food and agriculture, education, housing, and maybe most of all, healthcare and insurance. And I think right now, what's on my mind is especially abortion access right now with the things that we've seen happening in Texas and everything. So moving toward that collectively with all of you would be my wildest dream. I'll pass it to Jessica.
Yes, that was awesome, Kennedy. I'm going to piggyback off of what you said shortly. But my name is Jessica Haynes. I am a part of the Show Your Love Today squad. I'm also the perinatal and lactation education coordinator here in Mecklenburg County. And I'm so excited to be here. I feel like I have so many dreams for us. I feel like we're on a trend now where health and wellness are becoming prioritized, especially with the help of social media. And I would love to see a world where everyone has access to healthy foods, recreation centers, parks, sidewalks, and all those things. A world where mental wellness is prioritized and normalized culturally and in the workplace, to be honest, where access to mental health services are also attainable. I would love to see breastfeeding normalized, especially in the Black community. And I also dream of relationships that are safe, filled with love, and supportive, whether that's with a partner, family member, or a friend. And again, I envision as well reproductive health and autonomy for all people, having the right to make the decisions about my body, and also equitable access to care without discrimination that's inclusive in a way that's affordable, and that'll offer quality contraception as well. And for all people with vaginas to have the choice to not get pregnant, or to terminate a pregnancy. I know that was a mouthful. I hope I didn't step on anyone's toes.
Thank you, Jessica. And I just wanted to jump in and both share my screen now that I've gotten a few nuggets from folks so you can see what is developing. And for the panelists, can you just give me a nod if you can actually see my screen? Thank you. And I also wanted to pick up on what you said about not stepping on toes, that part of graphic recording is to be able to hold multiple truths at once and to be able to have multiple perspectives in one conversation so they can be on the page together and we can see what that is like. And so with that, will you please pass it to someone, Jessica?
Yes, I would love to pass it to Shamika.
Hi, my name is Shamika Tumblin. I'm also a part of the Dream Team, the Show Your Love Squad. I am a project coordinator with City Match. I am also a local marriage and family therapist here in Nashville, Tennessee, as well as a full spectrum doula. So shout out to Kennedy, because I was like, yes, you and Jessica both. I do not want to repeat. So I will say, in addition to what both these ladies have said, is the understanding that there are boxes, yes, but we don't have to fit in the boxes. So making sure that people understand boxes are a way something the system has created to be able to keep track of the changes that are coming abroad. But the important thing is that we understand that box was created by someone so that they could keep track of data or keep track of something for themselves, but not for us as human beings to be able to be placed inside of. So the understanding to know that no one fits in a box, the systems that we are creating constantly, because although we say we want to dismantle systems, we know we're constantly creating them. The systems we are creating are to match the boxes. So we need to make sure that we are incorporating people within those systems that understand the boxes don't exist, so that our systems can hold and have a larger capacity for everyone. Because in order to have equitable care, the access that we're talking about, and to be able to promote healthy living, we have to understand there are no boxes. Something else I think that is a part of the big dream for me is the understanding that when we talk about creating healthcare teams, when we talk about creating teams, period, to be able to do work, we need someone across all fields and all spectrums, because there is not one single voice that represents any population. So we need to make sure that we're being representative of the people that we are here to serve. And the best way to do that is to have the teams that are serving them represent them. And if I were just to add one last point to that, it's the understanding that everybody's a lifelong learner, and to encourage that, and to make sure that when we are serving individuals, when we are creating teams, and we're talking to our colleagues, that we're talking to them from the perspective of we're lifelong learners. No one, like we love to say we're an expert, yes, but we're growing experts. There's always going to be something new to learn, and not to be afraid to learn that, not to be afraid to make mistakes, and to always understand that humility is a huge part of this work, and being able to apologize when we have done wrong, but use that not as an apology to stick where we are, but an apology to move forward and say, I now see where this may be going off track, or I now see how this care is no longer the care you need. So how do we move forward together? And I want to kick it off to Alish.
Hi again, Eilish Neely, public health practitioner out of New York City. I've studied public health, and I decided to go back to school, do the brave thing, go back to school for social work. So I'm currently in my second week as a social work student at Hunter College's Silberman School of Social Work. And I was just thinking while everybody was talking, I was thinking about, the wildest dreams question, because my dreams could get pretty wild. And so I thought about, I want to say, several years ago when I was 18 years old, one of my professors planted a seed. A part of our assignment for school, part of our grade was to go to the counseling department, and it was mandatory. So everyone had to go and have at least one session. And so I went, I'll be transparent, I did go, and it planted the seeds for me to understand, like, wow, that thing that happened to me before, it affected me in this sort of way. And how did that sort of steer my decision making when it came to relationships and sexual health and all of those sort of things. And so my wildest dream would be for all colleges to at least mandate, require, I guess require sounds a little bit nicer than mandate, but I'll say mandate for now, mandate at least one visit to the counseling department as a part of the students' freshman orientation. And if we want to get a little bit more spicier, it would be really important to incorporate that to all years. So at least one counseling session per academic year. And by saying one counseling session is just allowing folks to sort of like deal with their sort of bias and stigma and fears centered around mental health support, right? If I never went, I would have not known my possibilities and perhaps be a different person, not even be where I am today. So I'm super, super grateful and glad that my professor had that grandiose idea that changed the trajectory of my life. And I believe it's really important. I don't think we can really talk about health and public health and reproductive health without focusing on like the backgrounds, right? Because life will continue to happen around us and to us. And how do we deal with that, right? And I also, my even wilder dreams would be to incorporate its core competencies in elementary school, self-esteem building classes. I feel like that would definitely set the course for later on decision making, conflict resolution, relationship building, relationship development, sustaining, and also just the future of our future Americans, our future public health practitioners, our future superheroes that will shape the world and will be at their mercy at some point in time. So that's my wildest dream.
I'm going to toss the mic over to Nargis to weigh in on your wildest dream.
Good afternoon. I'm Nargis Farahi. It's so wonderful to be here, and I'm already just inspired and energized by everyone here. I'm a family physician and also provide perinatal care in and outside the hospital. I work at UNC in the family medicine department and also at a community health center here in Prospect Hill, North Carolina, so a rural community health center. And so my heart is in community health, and my wildest dream is that every person, every family, every community be fully supported to achieve optimal health and well-being. And that health and well-being would really be envisioned and defined by the individuals and communities we are serving, and based on shared values, on accurate information, on collective wisdom and knowledge. And I envision a world where all people are supported, not just to survive and kind of get through and make it, but to truly thrive and achieve their dreams. And so in my mind, this really requires kind of shifting power. And as someone who works in medicine and works in academia and also works in a kind of community setting, I can definitely see so many of those power differentials at play. And I just think kind of shifting power to communities, to particularly communities that have been marginalized by all of our structures, and especially within healthcare, is essential. And I think it really requires the transformation that Kennedy, Jessica, and others have expressed so beautifully. And I will turn it over, Sarah, or
I think
last one.
we've done the first round on wildest dreams. So do we want, Rio, I'm turning it back to you.
Perfect, thank you. And let me do a very quick orientation to some of the things that I have been hearing. First of all, this image of this woman in the tree, this actually came from Sarah's brain, but the credit where credit's due. But what I'm hearing is this idea of folks who are in reproductive years, and all folks, really being both products of their roots and thinking about what are some of those roots. How do we address those? Talking about systems, talking about core competencies, ability to have access to mental health, safe and loving relationships, not being put in a box, teams serving, representing those who they serve, and reproductive justice as an overarching theme for much of this. And then y'all has started to get into the second question, which is fantastic, which is how do we get there? Really, what do we do to get to those wildest dreams? And for this question, I invite you to really interact with the graphic that's on the screen, talk about how we can build towards it. Some things that folks have already started mentioning are this intentional transformation of systems, shifting of power, approaching things with humility and the learner's mindset. And this time, you're welcome to speak if and when the spirit moves you. Silence is also invited if you are still processing or if others have shared what you wanted to share. And again, Sarah will help keep us sorted out. If you want to jump in, jump in. And if you start talking at the same time as someone else, that's okay. We'll work through it.
I'd love to jump in and go first, you all. So Shamika speaking. And I think something I would like to take a stab at is the intentional transformation of systems. I think a way we can start with that now is supporting organizations that are already making that happen. We know there's power in numbers. If I were to name a few, we have Sister Song, there's City Match, not just because I'm a part of them, but the reason I'm a part of them is because they're doing that work. Also, we have organizations that are doing grassroots work, such as any community-based doula program. They are in the community, they're creating information, they're sharing knowledge. That also goes for our local health departments and organizations that are grassroots nonprofits who are within those communities as well. The university systems that are already creating those changes. Dr. Sarah, Suzanne, those that are hosting this conference are right there at UNC. So that shows us there that there's a university that is clearly putting money and power and people behind a vision that is worth, not only going after, but a vision that's going to create changes within the future. And how do we continue to support that? How do we continue to not only encourage people to join those organizations and institutions, but how do we encourage people to be more knowledgeable about them? Because even if you don't become a part of the organization, having knowledge encourages individuals who need that help to find those organizations and those sources of assistance and aid. And not only that, but a part of creating access. And I like to say a lot of times, like, I'm like the mental health plug. It's not about getting all the certifications and getting all the education. It's about creating networks and knowing individuals within those areas so that when people come to you, you can send them to others and know that they're getting the assistance that they need and also getting the attention that they need as well.
I'll go. So just going off of Shamika's point about everyone having access, yes, to clean water, to adequate healthcare, to, employers who respect them. But when you think of access, and what I mentioned previously is that I am now a student again, and I'm sure there are more other students in the audience as well. Access also means availability to quality scholarships. So I know I did the search, and let's just say I don't have any scholarships because first of all, you have to sort of dig so deeply for scholarships. And then when you do find some, they're not, the awards are not so great to offset the actual cost and rising cost of higher education. And so what would be great, and first, before I even go further, I just want to make a point that poor and low income is not synonymous with Black and brown. But I'm going to speak specifically for Black and brown. And if we want to talk about equity and having better quality of care, and folks, I don't want to use the word compliant, but I will use it in this moment, and to offer opportunities for more folks of color to be able to become practitioners, whether that's a midwife, a nurse, a doctor, a social worker. We have to sort of revamp how scholarships are being presented and who's getting them, and also maybe perhaps encourage folks to develop more scholarships with increase awards, because are you gonna put forth a scholarship to say you're gonna give somebody $250 to go towards school when we know you need a little bit more than $250 to go to school? So just rethinking that level of access, because that could be the very thing that decreases the amount of people of color going into these particular roles, which would then probably more likely offset the quality of care that our communities are receiving. And and when you think about maternal child health, prenatal care, and all of that, with the folks who are dying in childbirth. So just what if we provided more resources and more money and more opportunity for folks who look like the folks who seem to be at the highest of the data of having preterm birth or miscarriages or what have you. So what would it look like if we increase the amount of scholarships, worthwhile scholarships, and also how much the scholarships are worth?
That was incredible. Thank you for that. I'm just going to build on that because you said a lot of the things that I've been thinking about. I think it requires really sustained investment in community-based organizations, those who are at the grassroots level, who really understand what's happening in context, like Sarah showed in that slide. All of those things are a part of what produce our health, but they're all in context. And I think people who are actually at the grassroots level, people who look like the people that they're serving, have the capacity to really make a difference and should be the loudest voices in creating that solution. And so for me, I think about that as, and people use this a lot, centering those who are the most marginalized. If we do that, everybody else is going to be just fine. If we recreate systems and really design thinking about tearing down all the barriers that have existed for the people who are most marginalized and flip the script on that, shift the power and pass the mic, I think we'll create the kind of solutions that can actually be sustained, that are culturally appropriate, that are evidence, all of those things, these best practices that we talk about.
Yes, I feel like you guys said all the things. I was snapping throughout. It was amazing. I agree. I think we also get there by reaching the most marginalized, and understanding where oppressions also intersect. Our overall health and well-being is shaped by an overlapping of factors like race, immigration status, education, income, ability, sexual orientation, etc. And I think to get there, organizations, lawmakers, and medical professionals should shift how they relate to the populations they serve. Question whether particular health needs of communities that face intersecting forms of oppression are being met. So not only just looking at how restrictions impact folks generally, but also how particular communities are impacted.
I want to build on what Kennedy and Jessica said about centering the margins and really flipping the script. And I think for someone who is kind of within medicine and also within kind of an academic setting, to me, one thing that I often think about is the importance of listening. And listening is critical, I think, on a big systems level, as well as on that individual one-on-one level with patients and families. You know, I think, as has been said, like, communities that are most impacted by health inequities understand the root causes of those health issues and really hold the solutions. And so listening and really centering those voices and lifting up those solutions and supporting organizations that are already doing that work is essential. I think for healthcare systems and clinics, that also means community collaborations, partnerships, really kind of in true partnerships to help change our paradigm. So we are focusing more on healing, dignity, and true care, and not just kind of health services. And then on a kind of individual level with patients and families, really listening to the person there in front of you, really trying to kind of not just go in with your own agenda, but really kind of listen to that person's values, fears, concerns, their dreams, and then from there really engage in truly shared decision-making based on that foundation of listening. And I think both on a systems level as well as on an individual level, that can make a really big difference.
Absolutely. I can't help it. I have to jump in. I'm a social worker too. And I also am still coming down from the high of listening to Sonia Renee Taylor, who spoke at an event yesterday. And, you know, she really talks about how there needs to be that inside work too. And so I think about that, and if we're getting to get real, right? Like, when I look at myself and I judge myself, like, you look old, or you look blah, blah, blah. Like that, all that stuff that I do to myself manifests in the world. And so I think kind of looking at that mental health and like creating a space where we feel loved and valued outside of what we give to capitalism and society. I don't know, there's just something that's really resonating with me, and just the words that she talks about in terms of what does that radical self-love look like for all of us, and when we manifest that on the inside, how then do we actualize that? I also think that as much as I want to like run away from the academy, and I always thought I would be one of those small community organizations out there, I have to realize that I really need to be an academic activist. And that's not really as much fun, but it's really important because that's how we work to get those scholarships. And that's how we create classrooms that, and professors that know how to teach better in racialized spaces and know how to think about what we're presenting. And I think that's the same in healthcare systems, right? I feel sometimes providers and people in that system get a little tossed around by that system instead of also saying we have voice and we have power to also shift up, you know, how we're being paid and kind of all the boxes we have to check, you know. So I'm kind of like also to my colleagues out there in health, like rise up, you know, because you know the care you all want to give, and we see how the systems are keeping you from bringing that and manifesting that forward. So also, I just have to say, this is my wildest dream right now. I'm living my wildest dream. And I just wanted to tap a couple of things to chat before we move on, because I wanted to honor that. A couple of other wildest dreams in the chat. One is that our struggles over abortion and family planning would be behind us. I think that really lifts up what Kennedy named in particular at the beginning. And then also Anne-Marie from Ohio said, you know, could we shift to a norm of wellness and a work week that allows us to spend time with family, friends, just for that care, cooking. And I think that kind of goes a little to what I'm thinking about with radical self-love too, is you got to take a minute to have time to breathe. So I wanted to lift up that from both Kay and Anne-Marie, and then turn it back to you. And others keep jumping in. Shamika, take it next.
Well, something that you all have said or themes that I've heard that I kind of want to bring attention to, and I think it's in the how do we get there. We have to understand that we're all advocates, and a huge part of our roles is teaching individuals to be self-advocates. So when I think about why I do or have the roles that I have in their intersections, being a full spectrum doula, being a therapist, those roles, I'm constantly helping individuals identify for themselves, as you know, Dr. Sarah said, I'm helping them identify for themselves what internally is your motivation or what is the change that you're making internally. And then how do we adjust that to understand, even if you can't change the people around you, how do you stop allowing them to hinder the change that you need to create within you? And how that goes on the healthcare system as far as being a doula, how can you not conform to the system and do the things that the system is telling you to do, but learn that even when the system is giving you pushback, how to use your voice and say, I know my body, I know what I need, and what I'm saying is what I need. And also the power in, if you can't provide that, let me know so I can go elsewhere. And we've taught individuals to say, if a doctor is saying, you know, they aren't going to run certain tests or they don't agree with that, to start making documentations in your chart. So it's not a your word against their word. It's in the forms that are used within that system, it's noted this physician made this decision, even though the patient said themselves this is what they wanted. Another form of that also is in the work I do, being a reproductive advocate, reproductive justice, understanding, and especially using social media, because it's a platform I feel that is not going anywhere. Using that to give others the language that I've went to school and learned, the money I paid for. Alicia was talking about how do we make, you know, knowledge accessible. Those of us that have the knowledge, it's not for us to gatekeep. It's how can I share it? What organizations can I go into and share this knowledge with? If a community organization is hosting something, yes, I want to be paid for my work. But if the goal is to uplift that community organization within my community, guaranteed it's either going to be free or it's going to be at a reduced cost, because I know there's other places I can go into and charge a full rate and they can pay that and it won't hurt them at all. So how do we use ourselves as leverage and resources to offset some of the things that we're talking about?
The things you said really made me think about power. To me, that was the common thread of what the different examples that you gave. It's around identifying power, building power within our communities, those community-based organizations, but also using, for instance, the EMRs and charts that healthcare providers often use, using that to leverage our own power. And I think that's something that we don't think enough about, or think of as kind of a dirty word. Like, don't hoard it, but share and build with others. Strategizing with others, like we're doing on this call, is something that will build power toward this collective vision that we have. So it's incredible.
I want to note that Karen from Ohio, hi Karen, said that science-based, evidence-based programs are important, but in order to make change, we need to allow for innovation and provide financial support for newer programs that seem promising but may not have the evidence behind them quite yet. Seeing some nods, yes, thank you.
I did want to jump in. I agree with that point wholeheartedly, just because of the work that I do on a normal basis, which is determined by data, right? And the data has not changed much over time. And so I often think, well, what could be done and what has not been done? And are folks scared to do it? So when I think about how do we get there, in all due respect to the folks who have paved the way for us public health practitioners and health professionals, but I believe there could be more room given to us new folks coming in, you know, like the new generation of public health practitioners who have ideas that might seem wild and not backed by data. But if you look at, you know, like the age group of who is up and coming in these particular organizations, we're a reproductive health age, you know, we're a reproductive age. So it's sort of like we might have a little bit of insight that is not backed by data, but is backed by life experience. And so by tapping into your actual team, your actual staff who have creative, innovative ideas, who actually might be the population in which you are trying to reach, not abuse them, but definitely honor their voices.
Awesome. Looking at you, Rio.
All right. Yes, there was a lot of energy that I felt in the room, across the internet, and in the chat around that. And some of the big themes that I'm hearing are really around power, what it means to shift it and share it. And some of that includes sustained investment, thinking about what if we provided more scholarships and opportunity for those who look like us. And by us, I'm including myself as someone of reproductive age, who is a woman of color, in the group of people who are providing care. What if we shifted power to communities marginalized by structures and shared decision-making? What if we looked at data and thought about it as life experience? What if we understood where oppressions intersect? Because all of us are not just one thing. This gets back to up here. Boxes don't exist. No one fits in a box. They were created by systems. What if we had humility, and what if we listened? We also talked more broadly about this intentional transformation of systems. I mean, that's underlying everything. But some of what that could look like specifically is supporting organizations that are already there, having the folks who are inside the systems rise up, teaching others and learning how to use our own voices to advocate for ourselves, and creating networks. And then this, I just personally loved this quote. I think that fear is a very useful teacher. What hasn't been done, and are folks scared to do it? And I think that looking at that is partially how we get from this group of people in the blue all the way over to this this tree person. So with that, I'd love to transition us into our final question, which is really, what is an action item for everyone participating in this convening to take what is your charge to yourself and to others in this space? And, you know, we started getting a little into action items, but the things that I just covered are still pretty big picture. And so I'd like to explicitly bring this down into tangible steps, ideas, pieces of encouragement, and invitations that folks may need. And also to remind us that these can be pieces of doing, things that we do. They can also be ways of being. So with that, again, I will just open it to whoever feels moved to speak first.
I was thinking about something that was told to me, which is honor your faculties. And what that means is go drink some water if it's been too long. Go give yourself a bio break. A lot of times we're thinking that, you know, the more we push, the more clients we see, the more meetings we take or calls we take after, you know, 5 o'clock on a weekday when we should be with our families will push us forward like there's something to be done, without realizing that there's always going to be something to do tomorrow. And so with that, I would just encourage people to take a nap, nap ministry, take a nap, eat well, you know, move your body in a way that is comfortable and fun and exciting to you. Prioritize your mental health. I think by honoring our faculties, it'll help us serve the community better. It'll also help us be at our highest when it comes to program planning, idea generating, applying for grants, right, to do more awesome work in the community. So an action step, keeping in mind everything that's here in this beautiful graphic, is to honor your faculties.
That was beautifully said, Eilish. We must take care of ourselves in order to take care of others. I would say to, like, in the workspace or in advocacy or wherever space you're in, to ensure that the voices you're serving are incorporated in your work. We should always strive to include everyone in our work and listen to them and what they want for their communities and allow them to be the spokespeople for their causes, and not only listen to them, but collaborate with them as well.
Can hop in. In the spirit of social work and its emphasis on self-awareness and reflexivity, I would encourage everyone to learn more about themselves, to dig deeper in exploring your body and your mind, your sexuality, all of that. And I think this requires a bit of re-education, a bit of realizing what our sexual education systems and our health education systems have not taught us, and going out and finding the information that we need to make informed decisions about our health and well-being.
I think, so a charge that I'm taking on for myself is to continue to share the knowledge that I have, to continue to use the platforms that I have to grow them in sharing voices of others, and to use them to do work in fear, which means sharing stories that people often like to shy away from because they are ones that don't make you feel comfortable, whether that be talking about maternal mortality, talking about infant loss, and uplifting those communities and letting them know that they're not in the shadows, but there are people who are wanting to do the work, and understanding that without sharing those stories, we can't get the resources that we need. So continue to use myself in that way. I think a charge I would like to give everyone listening is not only taking a look at yourself, but a look at the organizations that you're a part of and the people you're doing work with. And are you all on the same team? Because oftentimes we work for organizations, but we're not all on the same team. And we have a problem with holding light to that and actually encouraging others to stand in those uncomfortable conversations and saying, it's okay. Yes, we're in a time frame where you do what you do sometimes to make money, but the understanding of not all money is good money. And if I'm truly here just to get the money, then where's the impact Like, what impact am I creating, and how am I truly changing the world for the better? And to pull others into those conversations. And this is where your network is important. Being able to help guide people to places where they can create impact and be on teams where they do have shared visions, and not be afraid of that. And last but not least, drawing on what Alicia shared, encouraging us to uplift those that are coming behind us and wanting to continue the work, and understand oftentimes we start things that we won't see completed. And I learned that from a mentor, is that whole, like, this is my baby and I don't want to let my baby out of my sight. But sometimes we know that oftentimes children learn, grow, and do things, not often because they've seen us, the parents, do it, but because they've seen others in our communities and in our village who weren't afraid to take steps that we may be afraid of. And then our children had the courage to do the same. Speaking broadly, I don't have any physical children, but I have a lot of babies that are projects that I've had to learn that with. It's okay to let others be the guide, because they can take something that you have sometimes farther than you can, and you'll never know if you're afraid of letting it go.
I'd like to build on both of those things. I think in terms of digging deeper and doing the inner work, both kind of in yourself and also kind of in the setting that you work in, I think, you know, in healthcare, it is just so essential to acknowledge the ways in which our field perpetuates harm, has historically done that and continues to do that in the way that healthcare operates and the way that healthcare is provided. And it perpetuates harm externally to the people that we serve, and also internally to the people who work within the system. And so really, like, acknowledging that, trying to understand that, and then finding ways of really, as Sarah said, rising up and trying to root out those oppressive structures and really be a voice for change, both from the inside and then, you know, from the outside as well. I think that kind of constant unlearning of the things that we have been taught, and the those like false narratives and assumptions that have been a part of like, I think medical education for a long time is really essential, and that takes listening and reading and questioning and thinking critically and just being open, and that is essential. And I think, you know, as an educator of future healthcare providers, I think that you know, the next generation has the answers. They're asking the questions. They're thinking more critically. They're not just, you know, accepting the legacy that they're inheriting. And so really having the humility to acknowledge that I may have more clinical experience or be doing this work longer, but I don't have the answers, and I may not even always be asking the right questions, and just like, just shining a light on that vision from the people who have that kind of fresh lens and are bringing, I think, a really important kind of critical eye to so many structures that we've taken for granted.
Jessica, I want to give you space if you want to get in, but also no need to jump in if you don't want to. I will, well, I'm going to read a couple of things from the chat. This has been so great. Thank you everyone for sharing. So definitely had a lot of resonance in terms of also talking about the reality of pregnancy loss and infant loss and fertility challenges, primary, secondary infertility. There's so much suffering that's done in silence, and then and when there's not enough information and it's discounted as that's not important. I think that's just really important to lift up, that it's the breadth of all of these experiences. And so I thank you for mentioning that. And also talking about listen, lead with love, and when the listening reveals an opportunity to advocate or change systems, to act on that. And so lots of yes on lead with love. And then also thinking about adolescent and primary care medical visits, EMR, intake forms. They've always had the usual health history what else could we do to shake that up in terms of getting to know that person as a person and their goals and the challenges that are uniquely theirs. We're doing great on time, everyone. I wanted to also just put out a couple of other things since we're getting to tell people what to do. I really would love just to see organizations to look at their budgets, and when you're making a budget or writing a grant or a project, that as a first step, we just create line items to be paying other people to join the team, and think about just really bringing that on the team. That's something that you can do today, because we do budgets all the time, every day. I feel also that we tend to be in silos. So we know there's a lot of work going on around interpersonal violence, for example, but we're not always like at the same meetings. So I just wonder, like, how do we pull people together so it's a whole person care? It's definitely something that I wonder about. And then I just also want to underscore, like, I love that we've been talking a lot in this space and not use the word maternal, because I know maternal health matters, but like it still feels like a lot of the funding and the investment is like, well, once you're pregnant, okay, now you're valid, right? Okay, now you've shown yourself to society, now we're fine, except, and now we're finally realizing that when we don't pay attention to postpartum moms, well, that's okay, maybe we should do that, right? Okay, fine, she's not pregnant, but we'll care. Oh, I'm gonna get on a soapbox. Anyways, this is just how I'm feeling. And so I would just love to like be in a space where it doesn't matter if we've had children or if we're pregnant, that we can get services and support and care to just be the best us, and for all of the creativity and ideas and energy that we as people bring into the space. Thank you. Others, we have time. Any other jump in? Action.
And perhaps can I add an invitation, any other specific actions or as you're looking at this representation of what we talked about, is anything missing either from what I captured that didn't make it on here, or that is coming up for you now? And part of this is, again, trying to honor the fact that we all process differently and in different ways. And just because we have entered and gone past questions doesn't mean that we can't come back and revisit. And I see folks looking faces on, which is wonderful. And I invite the same question into the chat. I see equity in infertility care, especially for Black and Brown women, continuums in care, achieving whole person care throughout the entire life course. Yes, yes, yes. And I will add some of these, but please feel free to speak into the space as well.
I believe we could add breastfeeding in there as well.
And are you thinking about as how we get there? Tell me more about that.
I guess I can go into the wildest dreams portions where it's normalized, and we get there by, increased education around breastfeeding, supporting breastfeeding families, creating breastfeeding friendly spaces, whether that be in churches or the workplace, et cetera.
Hearing silence.
There's one comment in the chat. Do you want from Kristen? Include your community in the conversation to gain understanding of their perception of what they see as the priorities for preconception health, reproductive well-being, and equity. Thank you, Kristen.
I'll add that just hearing the word preconception, a word that I've been dancing around for the past decade while being a part of the work. Prior to, I've never heard the term before. And what I will say is to help folks really understand how their behaviors of today can affect their tomorrow, right? When we look at I'll use social media because I'm a millennial. So if you look at social media, you see folks doing all kinds of wild and wacky workouts because they want to achieve a certain aesthetic physically, but no one's really talking about how about I don't want to take a bunch of pills when I get 65. I want to retire without needing a walking aid or things of that sort. So I would like to encourage the collective to help folks really make those connections about their earlier behaviors, the health, I will say, priorities they're not prioritizing, and how that could ultimately affect their likelihood to create a family or build a family or be healthy enough to stick around to see first birthdays and fifth birthdays and prom and college graduations. Yeah, I would say let's do better with that.
I think going back to the vision of reproductive justice that kind of started us off, and thinking about how reproductive justice is really rooted in this human rights framework, and thinking about each individual human being and kind of their dignity and honoring that. I think in terms of what we need to do to get there, I think we do also need tangible things like universal healthcare and healthcare that covers a lot of the services that we're talking about, culturally sensitive lactation services, community doula care, that really covers care throughout the life course so that it's not fragmented and really facilitates integrated behavioral health care. And so I think that kind of access to universal healthcare is essential, but also what our healthcare covers and making sure that that's really comprehensive and in line with those goals of reproductive justice is really essential.
To add to that, I know we discussed it. I'm not sure if it's, I tried to glance over the graphic, but making sure we promote interdisciplinary teams. Because even, like I say, if I think about the work I do, whether it's creating a birth plan or creating a plan of assistance within the hospital because someone may not be having a live birth, I'm not just going in one particular role. I'm going in representing my role, yes, but there's a team behind me that I've already told the individuals, the family, these are the people that we need to make sure on our teams. If I'm working on a birth plan, doula, of course, making sure that the doctors are people who are in alignment with your goal, making sure that you have a mental health professional. Also, the community, what does your built environment look like? Do we need to be connecting you to other organizations so that you can get assistance or aid in that area? And then if I'm thinking about just in general, the work that we're doing, when we all introduced ourselves, this is an interdisciplinary team. All of us have those intersections, yes, but we all in our day-to-day roles or that full-time role, we hold a different title and we do different work. But once again, we have a network here that we go back to and we're like, okay, these are people who represent organizations or represent roles that I know I can pull from if something were to come up, whether it be a speaking engagement or literally working one-on-one with each other. And then going back to those boxes don't exist. Interdisciplinary teams help us ensure that boxes don't have to exist, because as a group, we can see things from different lenses that one specific person cannot.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Ria, I'm going to turn it to you for the closing word.
Goodness.
And back to our hosts to move it to the next session.
My closing words are goodness. This has been amazing and powerful. Thank you all for your time. Thank you all who are watching for your time. and for the space that we are in, for the land that we are on, for the bodies that we're in that allow us to be here today, and the people who got us here. This is a wonderful beginning to the whole rest of the conference. And so with huge thanks, I'm going to pass it back to whoever is moving us next magically.
That is me. I used to want to be Princess Jasmine growing up, but I'll take that. This is my opportunity. So right now, folks, we are headed into a break. It is 2:29.